In 1872, a ship called the Mary Celeste was found drifting quietly across the ocean. Her sails still up, food still on the table, but her crew had completely vanished. But that was just one of many ghost ships that history has recorded. There have been at least 10 vessels found like this, floating aimlessly, their crews gone without a trace. The USS Cyclops disappeared with 309 people aboard, never to be seen again. The Beshamo was sighted for 40 years after being abandoned, as if it refused to die. What's most chilling is that some of these disappearances happened suddenly, within minutes, while others took place in total silence. So where did these people go? What really happened out there on the endless sea? Drop your location and the time you're watching in the comments below. Please subscribe to Eerie Hour for the full investigation and turn on notifications so you never miss a mystery. November 7th, 1872. My name is Thomas, captain of a merchant ship called the Mary Celeste. Today we leave New York City for Genoa, Italy, carrying 1,700 barrels of industrial alcohol. It should have been a routine trip. Nothing unusual, nothing dangerous. My wife and our 2-year-old daughter are with me this time. I've sailed this route before, many times. I never thought this voyage would destroy everything I loved. The first week went smoothly. The Atlantic was temperamental as always. Gray skies, cold winds, but manageable. My crew was skilled, my first mate experience. The barrels were tied down tightly, the navigation tools all working perfectly. I checked everything myself before departure. Everything felt completely normal, but the ocean doesn't like routine. It likes to test you. By November 15th, the weather changed. The wind howled louder, the sea turned black and violent. Waves crashed over the deck and the air smelled of salt and danger. It was rough, but I'd seen worse storms. I noted the conditions in the log, made corrections, and told myself we'd ride it out. My wife stayed below deck with our daughter. I could hear the little one crying sometimes, her voice mixing with the moaning of the wood and the roaring waves. It's the kind of sound that cuts through even the strongest sailor's nerves. Then on November 20th, the first sign of trouble appeared. The ship's carpenter knocked on my door, pale as chalk. He said water was leaking into the cargo hold, more than usual. My heart sank. I grabbed a lantern and followed him below deck. When I saw the water sloshing beneath the barrels, I felt dread grip me. It wasn't a trickle. It was enough to soak the planks. The water was rising, cold and dark. "Start the main pump," I ordered. We began pumping fast, but within minutes, the pump let out a grinding screech and stopped. Broken. The carpenter tore it apart, hoping for a simple fix. But what we found was worse. Corroded metal, twisted parts. It hadn't just failed, it had been dying slowly for weeks. We just hadn't noticed. My stomach knotted. We had a second pump, but one alone wouldn't hold back that much water for long. I tried to stay calm, but in the back of my mind, fear was growing like a shadow. I checked the charts and calculated how far we were from land. If my math was right, we were near Santa Maria Island in the Azores, maybe 4 or 5 days away. If we could reach it, we'd be safe. Land meant rescue. Land meant survival. I kept repeating that to myself. One broken pump wasn't enough to sink us. Not yet. But still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching, waiting beneath the waves. Over the next few days, I couldn't stop checking the water level. I'd go down into the dark hold with a lantern and a measuring stick, marking the rising water and writing it in my log. Every drop felt like a countdown. My wife started noticing my sleepless eyes and trembling hands. "You're scaring the crew," she whispered one night. "If they see the captain afraid, they'll lose all hope." She was right. I knew that better than anyone. A captain's calm keeps the ship together, but inside I was cracking. November 25th, the day everything changed. The storm hit with brutal force. The wind screamed. The ship groaned like a living creature in pain. The sea was black, wild, merciless. When I checked the water level, I saw it had risen again. The pump couldn't keep up anymore. The ship was slowly drowning. We had less than 24 hours before we lost control. I stood in my cabin, soaked, shaking, realizing what I had to do. I made the hardest decision of my life. We would abandon ship, Not because she was lost, but because I feared she soon would be. I called the officers and told them the pump had completely failed. That was a lie, but I needed them to believe we had no choice. We loaded the lifeboat. My wife, my daughter, the 7 crew members. All of us climbed aboard. I left one final note in the ship's log at dawn. Crew appears confused with anxiety. Everything looks bad. Those 3 words summed it all up. We lowered the boat, tied it to the Mary Celeste with a rope, and drifted beside her, praying for rescue. But the waves grew wilder. The wind tore through the line, and the ropes snapped. We watched in horror as our ship faded into the fog, her white sails vanishing into the mist. 10 days later, another ship, the Dei Gratia, found her. The Mary Celeste was still afloat, still sailing under partial sails, the cargo untouched, the provisions intact. Everything perfectly fine, except for one thing. We were gone. The crew that had abandoned her had disappeared into legend. The investigation that followed destroyed me. They accused me of fraud, mutiny, madness. They said no sane man would leave a seaworthy ship. But I did, and I have lived ever since knowing I made a terrible mistake. We were rescued, yes. My family survived, but I was wrong. I let fear control me. The ship wasn't sinking, I was. I misread the sea. I abandoned her out of terror, not reason, and that one choice turned into one of the greatest mysteries in history. The Mary Celeste became the ghost ship that sailed without her crew, a story whispered for 150 years. I am Thomas Briggs, and I've spent my life haunted by the same thought. If I had just trusted her one more day, if I had believed in her strength, none of this would have happened. The Mary Celeste didn't betray me, I betrayed her. My name is Robert, and I am 63 years old. I've lived in Barrow, Alaska all my life, working on ships in the frozen Arctic seas. I've seen things in the ice that make no sense, things no man should see, but one ship in particular still haunts my dreams, the SS Bachimo. It was 1931 when she entered our waters, a sturdy steel cargo ship owned by the Hudson's Bay Company. She'd made 9 successful trips through the north, hauling furs and supplies to remote settlements. By late September that year, she was preparing to return south before the winter ice trapped her. But the Arctic had other plans. I was only 28, working as a cargo handler, full of confidence. I thought I knew these waters, but the Bachimo taught me otherwise. The storm came out of nowhere, a roaring white wall that swallowed the world. Snow so thick you couldn't see the bow from the deck. Ice locked us in tight, turning the ship into a prison of steel and frost. Captain Sidney Cornwell gathered the crew, 22 men, and told us the truth. If we stayed aboard all winter, we'd freeze to death. The plan was simple. We'd evacuate to Barrow, just half a mile across the ice, wait for spring, then return to sail her out. It sounded reasonable, but the Arctic never plays fair. 15 of us volunteered to stay behind and watch the ship, protecting the valuable cargo. We built a small camp on the ice beside her and took shifts clearing snow and breaking ice from her rudder. The temperature dropped to 60 below. The world was pure white silence, broken only by the wind. Then, on November 24th, another blizzard hit, worse than before. The snow buried our shelter. The wind screamed like a living thing. The captain ordered us to stay put. No one was to go near the ship until it was over. When the storm finally stopped, we stepped outside and froze in shock. The Bachimo was gone. The ice was still solid where she had been trapped. Our cargo sat untouched, but the ship itself had vanished, leaving behind nothing. No wreckage, no debris, not even an oil slick. Just empty, silent ice. 3 days later, an Inuit hunter came to our camp. He said he'd seen the ship drifting free, miles away, sailing south with no one aboard. We thought he was mistaken, but he wasn't. That was only the beginning. Over the next 40 years, people kept seeing the Bachimo. Hunters, whalers, sailors. They all spotted her, gliding silently through fog, her decks empty, her windows dark. She would appear and disappear, always just out of reach. In 1933, she was seen near Wrangel Island, then again near Barrow, then near Amundsen Gulf. It was like she was alive, choosing when and where to appear. I spent my whole life following those reports. Every new sighting filled me with guilt and awe. We'd left her to the ice and she refused to die. The strangest part was that she never seemed to decay. Year after year, people described her as fully intact, her hull strong, her shape unchanged, as if the Arctic had claimed her as its own. Some say the Bechimo still sails beneath the northern lights, trapped between worlds, not alive, not dead, drifting forever through the cold and endless sea. Her steel body was strong, defiant against the cold grip of the Arctic. The ice never truly claimed her. It was as if the frozen sea itself protected her, keeping her preserved, alive, just so she could keep reappearing in people's lives, reminding them she still existed. In the 1960s, those sightings began to fade. I was older then, in my 60s, watching the world change. The Arctic didn't feel as unreachable anymore. Planes now flew over the endless white. Radios could send coordinates across the air. But the Bechimo seemed to drift farther and farther north, deep into regions untouched by man, places too frozen and too cruel for anyone to reach. The last confirmed sighting came in 1969. A pilot flying northwest of Alaska reported seeing her trapped again in ice, her hull perfectly intact, her deck blanketed with snow and frozen spray. He tried to radio her position, but by the time help could be sent, the ice had shifted. The coordinates were useless, and just like that, she was gone again. For more than 50 years now, not a single confirmed sighting. Just silence. But I know she's still out there. I'm an old man now, 83 years old. My hands shake and my eyes have grown dim, but I still dream of her, the SS Bechimo. I can almost feel her moving through that dark Arctic night, drifting quietly through the ice, her steel bones groaning beneath the weight of snow. She's still alive out there, I'm sure of it, still reminding the world that she refuses to be forgotten. People often ask me what I think happened, how a ship frozen solid in ice managed to free itself and sail away like something not bound by nature. Some think there was an earthquake that cracked the ice. Others believe a sudden warm current melted it just enough for her to slip free. A few say she was never as trapped as we believed, but the truth is, I don't have answers anymore. I've stopped searching for logic. I was there when she vanished. I saw the impossible, and I've been haunted by it ever since. There's only one thing I know deep in my bones. The Bechimo had a will of her own. She wasn't just a ship, she was alive. Built in Sweden in 1914, she survived the most brutal waters on Earth, carrying cargo and furs across the frozen edge of the world. When she was abandoned in the Arctic ice, everyone assumed she'd sink like all the others. But she didn't. She broke free. She lived. She was seen again and again for decades, drifting where no ship should be, untouched by time or ruin. I've often wondered if maybe we interrupted something by leaving her behind. Maybe she wasn't done with her purpose. Maybe the Arctic itself decided she was special, that she deserved a second life, a longer existence than any ship built by human hands. But sometimes when the nights are long and the wind howls like the sea remembering, I wonder if the truth is far worse. What if she wasn't just drifting aimlessly? What if she was searching for us, for the men who left her? Every time she reappeared across those 40 years, in places that made no sense, I couldn't shake the thought. Was she following us, trying to find her way back to the men who abandoned her? To Barrow? To me? I never went back after 1931. I moved south, to Fairbanks, then to Anchorage, trying to run from what I saw that day. But you can't outrun something that lives in the sea. You can't outrun a ghost made of steel and memory. The Bechimo changed the way I see the ocean forever. The Arctic hides its dead, but not all of them rest. Some things that we abandon never stop looking for us. Some ships are meant to sink quietly to the ocean floor, to join the silence of the deep. But some, rare, cursed ones, are meant to wander forever. The Bechimo is one of those. She's still out there, frozen in time, drifting with unseen currents, her shadow moving beneath the northern lights. I can feel it. She's waiting, watching, still searching. One day someone will see her again, frozen in the mist, silent and whole, her decks untouched by time. And when they do, They'll understand what I've always known. Some mysteries are never meant to be solved. Some ships belong more to the sea than to the men who built them. And some things, once released into the unknown, are never meant to return home. I have been the lighthouse keeper at Cape Hatteras for 23 years. I've faced countless storms, rescues, and shipwrecks in these cursed waters, but nothing has ever shaken me like what I witnessed on January 31st, 1921. That morning still haunts me. It made me question everything I believed about the sea, about ships, and about how easily men can vanish without a trace. The cold that day was unreal, bone deep, endless. The sea and the sky had blended into one gray, suffocating fog. I could barely see 50 feet beyond the lighthouse balcony. As I checked the lamp oil and kept the beacon burning, the routine gave me comfort. Repetition dulls fear. But then, through that wall of fog, something moved. At first, I thought it was just another fishing boat foolish enough to brave the storm. But as it drew closer, its shape began to form. A massive, 5-masted schooner, gliding silently through the gray. The name painted across her bow chilled my blood. The Carol Aegean. She looked perfect. Every sail set, every mast standing tall, cutting through the waves with a haunting grace. But something about her was deeply wrong. Her movement was too smooth, too deliberate, too empty. It felt like she wasn't being guided by men at all. As she passed the lighthouse, I realized what was happening. She was heading straight for Diamond Shoals, the graveyard of the Atlantic. No crew appeared on deck. No one tried to steer. No distress signals, no shouts. Nothing but the eerie silence of a ship sailing straight into death. I whispered to myself, she's going to ground. And then it happened. The impact. Even from the lighthouse, I felt it in my chest. The Deering slammed into the shoals with a force that shook the earth, sending plumes of seawater high into the air. Her sails flapped violently in the storm winds before going still, hanging limp like torn ghosts. Then she just stopped, trapped, all sails still set, untouched. I sent the alarm immediately. The Coast Guard was alerted, but the sea that day was madness. Waves 20 feet high smashed against the shore, making any rescue attempt impossible. For 4 long days, the ship sat there on the shoals waiting. When the storm finally eased, a salvage crew was sent out. I went with them. I had to see her with my own eyes. What we found chilled us to the bone. The ship was perfectly intact, but no one was there. Not a single crew member. Yet everything aboard screamed that they had only just been there. The galley table was set for a meal. Plates of food sat untouched. A pot of coffee rested on the stove. Cold now, but clearly brewed not long before. The captain's cabin was a mess. Papers scattered, drawers open, navigation tools missing, the ship's log gone. 2 anchors had been deliberately lowered, and the lifeboats were missing. Only 3 starving cats remained, their cries echoing through the empty halls. I picked one up. It was shaking, ribs visible beneath its fur. Whatever had happened, it happened fast. Too fast. The authorities came swarming. Coast Guard, Navy, federal agents, each desperate to explain the unexplainable. Theories flew like sparks. Pirates, mutiny, Bolsheviks, madness. Then months later, a fisherman found a bottle on the beach. Inside was a note. Deering captured by oil-burning boat. Crew handcuffed. Before we dive in, let me know in the comments what country you're watching from. I'd love to see where everyone's tuning in. And if you enjoy the video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more. Let's begin. I was supposed to be celebrating the start of forever with the man I loved. Instead, I spent Halloween night watching my honeymoon turn into something that still keeps me awake at night. My husband and I had saved for 2 years for this trip. We booked a balcony suite on one of Royal Caribbean's massive Oasis-class ships, the ones that look like floating cities, with neighborhoods, zip lines, and space for more than 5,000 people. The Eastern Caribbean route promised clear blue water, white beaches, and romance that never ended. And for the first 3 days, it was perfect. We watched sunsets from our balcony, ate until we couldn't move, and felt like the happiest couple alive. Halloween night started like a dream. The ship was completely transformed. Dark lights, eerie decorations, crew in full costumes. They had turned it into a floating, haunted house. We joined the midnight costume party in the main theater, danced until we were breathless, and finally stumbled back to our suite at around 2 a.m. We were laughing, tipsy, and in love. I was dressed as a vintage nurse, funny since I actually am one, and he'd gone as a ship captain. We collapsed on the bed still in costume, laughing so hard it hurt. I fell asleep fast. The gentle rocking of the ship and the soft sound of waves always knocked me out. I'm a deep sleeper, the kind that can sleep through almost anything. That's probably why I didn't hear him leave. When I woke up, the first thing I noticed was the pale morning light slipping through the balcony curtains. I reached out, expecting to feel him beside me, but my hand touched cold sheets. My heart skipped. I sat up, groggy and confused. The bathroom light was off, no sound of running water. "Babe," I called out. Silence. I checked my phone. 6:47 a.m. That's when the unease started to crawl up my spine. I searched the room quickly. It wasn't big, just a bed, a bathroom, a sitting area, and a balcony, empty. His phone was on the nightstand, dark. His wallet, his watch, and his room key card were all there. His shoes were still by the door, exactly where he'd kicked them off the night before. My chest tightened, but my training as a nurse kept me calm. I called guest services, trying to sound steady. "Hi, this is Suite 12,087. My husband's gone, but all his things are here. Can you help me find him?" The woman on the other end stayed calm. "We'll send security to your room right away, ma'am." "Please stay where you are." Within 5 minutes, 2 security officers arrived. They were polite but professional, asking a stream of questions while one of them looked around the room. Had we been drinking? Yes, but not that much. Had we argued? Number. Did he have any medical issues? Number. Any medication? None. Could he have gone out for breakfast or a walk? Not without his phone, key card, or shoes. That's when they said they'd check the security cameras. I followed them to the ship's security office, my hands shaking. They pulled up the hallway footage from outside our suite. The timestamp read 2:47 a.m. There he was, my husband, still wearing his captain's costume, but barefoot. His walk was strange, not like he was drunk, but like he was being pulled somewhere, following something I couldn't see. "He's heading to the elevators," one of the officers said quietly. They fast-forwarded. The doors opened, and he stepped inside. He pressed a button. Deck 15. The officer leaned forward, frowning. They pulled up the Deck 15 camera. The elevator doors opened at 2:49 a.m., but no one came out. My husband had vanished. They replayed it again. The doors opened to an empty elevator car. He was gone. "There's a moment when your brain refuses to believe what you're seeing," I whispered. "That's not possible." But apparently on cruise ships, people really do disappear. The ship went into Code Oscar, man overboard protocol. They searched the decks, the water, everywhere. I was escorted back to my suite by a woman from the victim services team. She kept telling me to stay calm, that they'd find him soon, that there had to be a reason, but I couldn't stay still. I kept pacing, calling his name, checking the balcony door over and over, even though it was locked from the inside. The ship kept moving, cutting through the endless ocean like nothing had happened. Thousands of passengers ate breakfast and laughed while I was losing my mind. They searched every inch of the ship: cabins, crew quarters, restaurants, pools, casinos, even the engine rooms. Announcements went out asking if anyone had seen a man matching his description. Hours dragged by. I called his parents. I tried to explain, but my voice broke every few seconds. By noon, I was sobbing uncontrollably. The doctor offered me medication to calm down, but I refused. I needed to be awake when they found him. They had to find him. Then at 3 p.m., 9 hours after I'd discovered him missing, my phone rang. "We found him," the officer said. "He's alive." I felt my knees give out. I couldn't even walk properly. They had to help me to the medical bay. And there he was, lying on a table, awake but dazed. When I saw him, I broke down completely. He looked at me with this confused kind of recognition, like he knew who I was, but couldn't quite remember why I mattered. "Where was he?" I asked. "In a maintenance corridor on Deck 3, the officer said. "One of our engineers found him." Deck 3. But the cameras showed him going to Deck 15. It didn't make sense. The corridor where they found him required a staff key card, and he didn't have one. That area had already been searched multiple times during the 9-hour hunt, by different crew members. Nobody had seen anything, but he was just sitting there on the floor, staring at the wall. The engineer who found him later told me, he said he was waiting for the party to start. My husband couldn't remember leaving our room. He said the last thing he remembered was falling asleep beside me. Everything after that was gone, but he kept muttering things that chilled me to the bone. While the doctor checked him, he would suddenly turn his head toward the corners of the room and whisper, "The children are here. Don't you see them? They want us to come to their party." There were no children anywhere near that room. The doctor found bruises on his arms, tiny finger marks, like small hands had gripped him hard. My husband is 6'2" and strong. Whatever had touched him wasn't human. Those marks couldn't have been self-inflicted. When I touched them, he winced and said they burned. 2 days later, I demanded that we leave the ship early when we reached San Juan. I didn't care about the money. I just wanted him off that ship. The medical team agreed that he needed to be examined by doctors on land. The cruise line was oddly helpful. They booked our flights home, refunded everything, and handed us piles of paperwork to sign. I barely read any of it. I just wanted to get him home. The nightmares began that very night. He jolted awake at 2:47 a.m., the exact time he'd walked out of our suite, screaming, drenched in sweat, clutching his arms. "They're pulling me," he sobbed. "The children. Their hands are so cold. They want me to come back to the party that became our new routine." Every single night at 2:47, he'd wake up gasping for air, eyes wide with terror. He kept describing the same vision over and over. Small children in Halloween costumes, faces painted like skulls, reaching for him with icy hands, leading him through endless ship hallways that twisted and changed, calling him to a party that never ended. He said the laughter echoed, high and cruel, mixed with the sound of the sea. He could never describe what the decorations looked like, only that they filled him with something worse than fear. I started researching everything I could find. I read forums, articles, message boards, anything that mentioned strange disappearances on cruise ships. There were whispers about unexplained events that had never made it into official reports. A few people mentioned Halloween cruises specifically. One old forum post talked about Deck 15 on Oasis-class ships, saying it had been rebuilt over old crew quarters after a fire decades ago. The post claimed that several crew members had died in that fire, including a woman who'd been babysitting her co-workers' children in a hidden daycare that wasn't supposed to exist. I couldn't find proof, and the cruise line refused to comment, but something about it felt too close to what my husband described. He went through every medical test you can imagine: brain scans, psychiatric evaluations, sleep studies. Every single one came back normal. The doctors called it trauma-induced night terrors, maybe triggered by sleepwalking and stress. They gave him medication, but it didn't stop the dreams. The bruises faded after a week, but sometimes when he's half asleep, he rubs his arms like he can still feel those small fingers gripping him. He doesn't go near the water anymore. We live miles from the ocean, yet he refuses to drive anywhere that gives even a glimpse of it. Our marriage survived, but something inside him didn't. That honeymoon, meant to be the start of everything, became the point where everything broke. He's still the man I love, but there's a haunted look in his eyes now, especially when October comes. We never talk about having kids. I think he's afraid to see something in their faces that reminds him of those children. Last year, I got an email from the cruise line, a promotional offer, an anniversary cruise at a huge discount. I almost deleted it without looking, but then I saw the small print. The discount was because Suite 12,287 had become available for the same dates we'd stayed there. Our exact suite, still there, still being booked, still waiting for another couple to fall asleep in that same bed, unaware. I wonder if they'll be warned. I doubt anyone ever is. My husband still wakes up at 2:47 a.m. sometimes. Not every night, but often enough. When he does, he reaches for me in the dark, whispering my name, needing to know I'm real, that I'm not one of them. I hold him until the shaking stops, both of us staring into the darkness, pretending we don't hear faint laughter echoing in the silence. We never truly found out what happened during those 9 missing hours. The cruise line insists he was in that maintenance corridor the whole time, but that doesn't explain the elevator, the bruises, or what he remembers. Sometimes when he's finally asleep, I sit in bed and look through our wedding photos from that cruise. We look so happy, so alive. In one photo, we're on deck 15, smiling with the ocean behind us. I'd looked at that picture hundreds of times, but one night I zoomed in. In the reflection of the window behind us, there were shapes, small, child-sized shapes. Probably just reflections. That's what I tell myself. But I deleted the photo anyway. I'd worked on cruise ships for 7 years when I learned something that made me leave the only life I'd ever known. What I found that Halloween night wasn't just hidden behind the walls of the Carnival Glory, it was buried deep within the company's secrets. I'd been an entertainment coordinator. People think it sounds like a dream job. Parties, beaches, fun. But it's not like that. It's 16-hour days dealing with drunk guests, performing the same shows again and again until you stop feeling human. Still, I loved it. I loved the ocean, the travel, the strange little family the crew becomes when you live at sea for months. I'd been with the Carnival Glory for 3 straight years. I knew every deck, every secret passage, every hidden corridor passengers weren't allowed to see. That Halloween cruise started like any other. Same route through the Gulf of Mexico, from Galveston to Cozumel and Progreso. I'd organized hundreds of Halloween parties with the same fake cobwebs, the same plastic skulls, and the same pumpkin drinks with dry ice. I could run the events in my sleep. The first complaint came at around 8 p.m. I was in the main theater setting up the costume contest when my radio crackled. Guest services patched a call through from cabin 8347. "There's something in my wall," a woman said, angry but frightened. "Scratching sounds like rats or something." Completely unacceptable, I told her we'd send maintenance and made a note to comp her a drink. Sometimes small pests did find their way in. It's the ocean, after all. I called maintenance and went back to adjusting lights. 30 minutes later, they reported back. Nothing. No pests, no damage, nothing unusual. Probably just ship sounds. I knew what they meant. Ships are always alive with noise. Metal creaking, engines humming, water rushing by. Passengers not used to it often think they hear things. I called the woman back, explained, and offered her a free dinner. She calmed down. The night went on. The costume contest went perfectly. Hundreds of people in wild costumes, laughter everywhere. Then my radio buzzed again. Different cabin, same deck. "Cabin 8352, I need someone here right now. There's scratching in our wall, and now we're hearing children laughing. This isn't funny." My stomach tightened. I promised to send someone immediately. Another maintenance tech checked. Same result, nothing. By midnight, 6 more cabins on that deck had called with the same complaint. Scratching, then laughter. Always in the same corridor. And that's when the cold dread set in. Because I knew something the passengers didn't. Something most of the crew didn't. Something that had happened 3 years earlier during my first season on the Glory. There used to be a crew member named Marco. He worked in guest services, spoke little English, and mostly kept to himself. He was polite, always smiling, and helpful to everyone. He'd been dating one of the cabin stewards, and they looked happy together, until everything went wrong. One night, a passenger's little boy, just 6 years old, had a severe allergic reaction to something he ate. The parents panicked, screaming for help. The ship's doctor was busy dealing with another emergency, and in all that chaos, someone asked Marco to watch the child for just a few minutes while they searched for an EpiPen. Just a few minutes. But those minutes changed everything. The boy's condition got worse. His breathing stopped. Marco panicked. Instead of calling for help or alerting medical staff, he froze, and then did something no one could ever explain. He picked up the child and disappeared into the ship's service quarters. When they found the boy almost 40 minutes later, he was dead. Marco said he was trying to get to the medical bay, but got lost in the maze of service tunnels. But investigators discovered that he'd gone into restricted areas that required special keycard access, places no passenger or even most crew were allowed. The company hushed it up quickly, paid the parents a huge settlement, and Marco was handed over to authorities when the ship docked. 2 weeks later, while waiting for trial, he hanged himself in his cell. But what haunted me the most wasn't his death, it was what they never found. No one could explain where Marco had gone during those 40 minutes. The boy's body was discovered near the laundry area on deck 6, but the timing didn't add up. Medical reports said the child had already been dead for at least 30 minutes when they found him. Yet security footage showed Marco walking around completely different parts of the ship during that same time. I was the one who had to clean out his cabin after he died. It was standard procedure when crew left suddenly. Inside, I found his journals filled with strange sketches of the ship, certain areas circled over and over again, deck service corridors behind other decks, secret routes no one used anymore. I never understood what it meant back then. But standing alone in the ship's theater at midnight on Halloween, hearing my radio fill with reports from Deck 8 about strange noises, I finally understood. Some secrets never stay buried. I told the other coordinators I'd handle the Deck 8 complaints myself. Grabbing my master key card, the one that could open any door, even the service tunnels, I headed upstairs. The corridor on Deck 8 was completely empty. Most passengers were still at the midnight buffet or gambling in the casino. I stopped in the hallway and listened. At first, I only heard the usual hum of the ship. Then came a faint scratching sound, soft but steady, coming from inside the walls. I followed it carefully, step by step, until I reached cabin 8347, the first room to report the noise. I pressed my ear against the wall between cabins, 8347 and 8349. The scratching continued, slow, rhythmic, and then, unmistakably, I heard it. Children's laughter, high-pitched, playful, wrong. My heart started pounding. I opened the ship's blueprints on my tablet and saw that behind those cabins was a narrow service corridor used for electrical systems. The access panel for it was in the laundry room one deck below. I knew I shouldn't go down there alone. I should have called security or maintenance or anyone at all, but I already knew what would happen. They wouldn't find anything. They never did. And after 3 years of sleepless nights thinking about Marco and that boy, I had to know the truth. The laundry room was dark and silent, except for the faint buzz of fluorescent lights. Rows of huge washers and dryers stood still. The air smelled of detergent and bleach. I moved a shelf of cleaning supplies aside and found the access panel Marco had marked in his journals. I swiped my key card and the lock clicked open. The smell that came out was wrong, rotten and old, not chemical or clean like the laundry. My stomach twisted. I turned on my phone's flashlight and crawled inside. The narrow metal tunnel was lined with pipes and wires. I had to crouch to move forward, my light bouncing off the walls as the air grew heavier and thicker. The smell of decay got stronger with every step until I finally saw it. Tucked behind a cluster of pipes was something small, a child-sized skeleton costume, half rotted and covered in dust. Beneath it, wrapped in what used to be white sheets but were now brown and stiff with age, was a small shape. My chest tightened. My breathing stopped. I stumbled backward, hitting my head on a pipe so hard I saw stars. I scrambled out of the corridor, my phone slipping from my hand, my legs shaking so badly I could barely stand. Marco hadn't left the boy where they found him. He had hidden him inside the walls of Deck 8. Later, he must have moved the body somewhere else, but he left behind the costume, the sheets, and whatever secret he couldn't bear anymore. For 3 years, that child had been lying just above those cabins, where families laughed and children slept, where honeymooners danced and guests toasted champagne. And now, on Halloween night, it felt like he was finally reaching out. The scratching, the laughter, it wasn't just noise, it was a cry from the walls. I stood in the laundry room for what felt like hours, though it could only have been minutes, trying to decide what to do. I knew I should call security, report what I'd found, but I also knew what would happen next. They'd remove the remains quietly, disinfect everything, and pay whoever needed to be paid to stay silent. The cruise line would keep sailing, the passengers would keep coming, and no one would ever know the truth. I thought about that little boy's parents, the settlement they got, the peace they thought they had. If they learned what really happened, it would destroy them. So I closed the access panel, cleaned the blood off my forehead, and walked back to my cabin on shaking legs. The next morning, I resigned without explanation. No notice, no reason. The cruise director begged me to stay, even offered a promotion. I told him I was just burned out and needed to be on land. I got off the ship in Galveston and never looked back. But the scratching and laughter, they didn't stop. Crew members still talk about it. Every year around Halloween, on the same deck, from the same cabins, you can hear it. The sound of something small, still moving inside the walls.